In this episode, we're going to be talking about consciousness and accessing transcendental states and states of oneness.
Welcome to Thriving Launch with Louise Congdon and Kamala Chambers, the show for heart-centered entrepreneurs who want it all.
5 days a week, we bring you different segments to inspire you to live a life of freedom. We interview the leading experts in the field of business, health, and love. Be sure to check out Training Tuesdays, where we give you a clear action plan to grow your own business.
How would you like to be able to interview world-class experts? Sit down and have chats with people like Jack Canfield, Marianne Williamson, Robert Kiyosaki, Tim Ferriss, you name it. Would you love to interview other people that you really admire and consider to be your heroes? Well, we've created a course for you that teaches you how to podcast, how to set it all up, and how to get going so that you can really have a successful show and you can do it properly. Over at thrivinglaunch.com, we have a podcasting course, and it's there for you, waiting for you to snatch it up. So head on over to thrivinglaunch.com and let me teach you how to podcast the right way. Today we have New York Times best-selling author, neurosurgeon, Dr. Eben Alexander. His life, his book are really wonderful. In his book, Proof of Heaven, he talks about dying and leaving his body, being in a coma for a full week, no brain activity, and yet he goes off into this wonderful, amazing space where he finds that heaven is real and that this place, this beautiful, blissful place is accessible to all of us right here, right now. We don't have to go into a coma. We don't need to die. And through today's interview, we'll discover how Dr. Eben advises us to go into these blissful states on a daily basis and what he discovered after dying and coming back into his body. We are here with Dr. Eben Alexander III. So exciting to have you on the show. I loved your book, Proof of Heaven. It was, for me, it was a mind-boggling experience to go through that with you, to read that book. It's awesome to have you here today. Dr. Eben, are you ready to launch?
I am ready to launch.
So exciting. So, for me, one of the biggest things that I got out of your book is this experience of consciousness, that it's not just our brains that are manufacturing consciousness, that there's a lot more to it, and that there's this whole world out there beyond what we tend to think about.
Well, that is a beautiful gift of the journey. And what it showed me very clearly, especially because of really the diagnosis itself, this severe gram-negative bacterial meningitis, it should have devastated any kind of conscious experience in my mind, and yet exactly the opposite is what happened. During this deep spiritual journey, deep in coma, when my doctors had full evidence from my neurologic exams and scans and lab values, and they knew that my brain could not have manufactured anything. And yet I experienced this rich, extraordinary spiritual journey that I talk about in Proof of Heaven. And in fact, that's why I'm often asked to speak at medical and surgical groups, is they realize this completely violates our simplistic and false notions of the brain creates consciousness. And the entire scientific world, the neuroscientific world, is headed away from that very erroneous thinking. Really, consciousness creates the brain. Consciousness creates not only the brain and body, but all of physical reality. And that's the emerging idea that's coming to the world of consciousness studies now, which is tremendously empowering for individual human beings. It really brings us up to a much higher level in terms of our interaction with the universe and our ability to manifest our free will in determining how the world turns out.
One of the big questions I have for you, and it's something that I tend to get really curious about with people like yourself who have had these mind-boggling experience of pretty much dying, leaving their loved ones, leaving their bodies, and then coming back. What is life like for you now? Do you feel like you're a more grateful person? Do you sometimes forget to have that gratitude, or is it just something that resides in you on a deeper level that's there more often? What's life like for you now?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. One of the most profound gifts of this is an astonishing sense of gratitude and knowing that all is well. Those were among the first words I spoke when I came out of coma. And it's very crucial for people to remember that when we take that really broad point of view, the much higher view of ourselves and our relationships with others and our existence here in this world, that all is truly well. And that brings tremendous gratitude. Obviously, most people who have near-death experiences come back realizing death is nothing to fear. It is not the end. So many people in our culture think that death of the physical brain and body is the end of their existence. And of course, that is something that to many people brings fear. And yet that is not the way this world really works. And it's because there's far more to this universe than just the physical. So me before a coma as a conventional neuroscientist, in believing, as many scientists do, that the physical world is the only thing that exists, I was very confused by all this. And my coma journey showed me clearly how I had it completely backwards. And what I've come to realize is that the entire scientific community is also awakening to this, mainly because those who tried to prove that the physical is all that exists, that the brain creates consciousness, and that our existence is birth to death and nothing more, are wrong. And the evidence that they are wrong is all around us in these kinds of experiences. So it really is a very refreshing and beautiful way to look at life. And of course, as I point out in the book Proof of Heaven, one of the deepest scientific truths of my journey is that love is fundamental in understanding every bit of this. I mean, so many near-death experiencers, they come in touch with that infinite healing power of unconditional love, and it changes their life forever. And it really is about coming to realize that we're all connected. We're all part of one beautiful consciousness that is throughout this universe. And that one consciousness is very directly connected with what many would call God or Allah, Brahman, Vishnu, whatever your word is for that source, deity, at the core of all existence. And coming to see all this from my journey was a tremendous gift. And the only appropriate response to all of it is gratitude, to realize that our existence is a beautiful gift. And that includes the hardships and the challenges and the difficulties in life. And as a doctor, I would include illness and injury. In many ways, they are beautiful gifts that allow us to grow, because it's how we face those hardships, how we're able to recover our sense of love and connectedness with this universe if we learn that lesson from the challenges we face, and that we are all interconnected, and the death of the physical body is not the end of our connection to loved ones. This much grander view of the nature of reality is one that is very refreshing indeed.
It's so beautiful to hear your experience of interconnectedness, of love at the base of all of us, because we do share that connection. And I've had these experiences before, never the way that you have experienced going into a coma, but definitely the feeling of interconnectedness, the feeling of oneness. And I think that the more that we practice accessing those states, the more it becomes natural for us, the more it becomes normal to feel that interconnectedness between all things. What do you think about that? Do you feel that the more that we practice in tuning to these states, the easier it becomes, and we don't have to go into a coma to access that?
Oh, very much. I often tell people in my talks that you don't have to wait till you die or wait till you almost die and have an NDE to know all of this. Sentient beings can come to know it fully by going within. And so this is why I do a lot of the work that I do with my life partner, Karen Newell, who is a co-founder of Sacred Acoustics, in trying to provide tools that allow others to go into deep transcendental conscious states. And one thing that I discovered about 2 years after my coma, when I was really beginning to get into a pattern of meditation and going within to get to some of these deepest answers, is when I discovered the whole phenomenon of binaural beats and kind of a differential frequency brain entrainment, and started working with that. And it provides a tremendous tool I mean, really, any form of going within, whether it's centering prayer or some form of transcendental meditation or other forms of meditation, is a real gift to coming in touch with exactly what you are discussing. And that is that sense of connectedness, that sense of oneness and of shared purpose, and that we're really all in this together. And so really to make choices in our life that are choices out of love, compassion, forgiveness, acceptance, and mercy, those are the most direct pathway towards that ascendance, towards oneness with the divine. And this is something that we can come to see and appreciate in deep meditation, but then, of course, it's really up to us to bring that into our lives, bring that beautiful message of love and connectedness into our daily activities. And the meditation simply helps to strengthen our connection with that oneness and to come to see the much greater power that we have as a conscious sentient being than we might think if we succumb to the falsehoods of the materialist mindset that tries to preach that we're all separate from each other. And I think it's an emerging view of consciousness in scientific circles that so strongly points to the oneness of all consciousness and how we are all interconnected. And thus, if I were to harm my neighbor or harm my enemy, so to speak, I'm really harming myself in a very deep and real sense. And this is why this kind of meditation and deeper understanding of the nature of reality is so helpful. And luckily, the answers lie within us all. Going within is a beautiful way to get there. But realize when I say going within, I'm talking about acknowledging that the little voice in our head is not our consciousness. One does not think their way there through rational and logical thought. That's why going within is so important. And part of the process of going within is taking that little voice in our head, which I love how Michael Singer in his book, The Untethered Soul, calls that voice in the head the annoying roommate, is exactly the right way to look at it. And that little annoying roommate that might interfere with our meditation is something that we just gently put into timeout, because our consciousness is our awareness. That is the deep mystery of consciousness from a scientific viewpoint, whether you're talking about the hard problem of consciousness, which is basically the impossibility of trying to somehow figure out consciousness just from the physical workings of the brain, or if you're talking about the measurement paradox in quantum physics, which is another expression of the same mystery. And it's all about realizing that consciousness is really the observer within, and we can set that observer free to far greater wisdom than if it's just locked into our little day-to-day thoughts and worries and the voice of our ego.
What I love about what you're saying is that it makes it very tangible for people to access, and that there are so many different ways to access these states of interconnectedness. I mean, we're always connected, right? But the bringing the awareness to the interconnectedness, it's a very, very powerful experience. And for many years, I've studied and went to school for various forms of healing arts. And you could access these states through breath, through movement, through prolonged eye contact, through the binaural beats that you and your life partner work with, through sound. And there's so many different ways, like meditation, that you're talking about, which is so beautiful. And I'd love to hear what your experience of accessing those states has been like when you're in your coma.
Well, I would say that a real breakthrough for me was about 2 years after my coma, as I was getting more and more into realizing that consciousness was fundamental and that our current scientific understanding of consciousness, especially the notions of brain creating consciousness, were completely wrong. And that's when I discovered that whole phenomenon of the binaural beats and of what I would say more generically is known as differential sound frequency brain entrainment. But it's an extremely powerful tool. Sound is able to access parts of our lower brainstem that basically involve circuits that have been here for 200 million years, ever since vertebrates crawled out of the muck. And these circuits are very crucial to the initiation of conscious awareness. And the scientific view that's coming to the fore about all this, given that the old production model, that is, that the physical brain produces consciousness, has never gone anywhere. No one has ever made any sense of that. But the scientific model that is replacing it is that of the filter theory, which is basically that the brain is a reducing valve or filter that limits primordial consciousness down to this tiny little trickle of our normal waking awareness. And in fact, we have access to far greater wisdom than that by going within. And I would say that this filtering mechanism is part of what we call the veil. You know, the veil kind of separates us from what we can know in our higher knowings when we reunite with our higher souls, say at the time of death of the physical body. But we can also get to that knowing and transcend that veil through various techniques of thinning the veil. And one of the most powerful, certainly the most powerful that I have experience with, is using sacred acoustics type binaural beats. They have a very profound power to them, and I would encourage any of your listeners to visit sacredacoustics.com. Karen Newell has put up some very instructive videos there for meditating. These are all free. And also a beautiful 20-minute Om meditation that has some very rich binaural power to it that can help people get into deep transcendental states. So just by visiting there and downloading those, the free sound file and listening through headphones, people can start experimenting right now with going within and use these extremely powerful tools to do so. I mean, I'm not denying that there aren't other wonderful techniques out there like float tanks and other means of getting into deep transcendental states. But my own personal experience has been very extensive with the sacred acoustics, and that's what I would encourage people to do. But going within is where we find the answers.
I really appreciate you talking about all of this, and it's great to have a neurosurgeon talking about this, somebody from the medical community, because oftentimes there's this segregation that happens between science, medicine, and academia. They're kind of over here, and spirituality and meditation and the talk of consciousness is kind of in this other field. And our dialogue today is really merging these two, and you're working as a bridge to merge these two. I'm curious, how has that experience been for you to be somebody in the medical community who's working as a bridge?
Well, it's interesting. One thing, when I first came out of coma and was trying to explain it to my doctors, of course, they knew all the medical details of my case that I did not know at the time. And in fact, all of my prior knowledge of brain-mind consciousness had been deleted. Every bit of my personal memory had been deleted deep in coma. That's what gave me such an extraordinary journey. But all my medical knowledge took about 8 weeks or so to come back afterwards. So initially, trying to explain it to my doctors, they would just pat me on the back and say, well, your brain was full of pus. We have no idea how you're coming back to us, but you can forget about it because your neocortex was far too damaged to have harbored any kind of hallucination, dream, drug effect, or anything of that ilk. You can just toss it out the window. But the more I then reviewed my medical records and came to realize what all had happened and how impossible it would have been for me to have any kind of mental experience, that's when my interest was greatly piqued by this. It turns out that very soon afterwards, in the next month or two, I was encountering doctors and colleagues who were very interested in this and who knew enough about consciousness to know that I was really on the trail of something fascinating and very revealing about the nature of reality. And in the ensuing years, it's now been 8 years or so since my coma, and I've met scientists all around the world, other physicians, neuroscientists, philosophers of mind, chemists, engineers, quantum physicists, etc., across the board scientists who realize that the materialist paradigm is an absolute dead end. Thinking that the physical is all that exists is a gigantic mistake. In fact, the exact opposite is really the truth, that the thing that really exists is consciousness, soul, and spirit. That's what exists. And you have to realize that all this material world is part of what Karen and I, in working on our next book about all this, called The Supreme Illusion. And that is the illusion that all the out there is out there. Because in fact, and this is actually not even a debatable point, it's a simple fact from first principles and observation. We need to realize that our mind, our brain and mind are so incredibly powerful at being able to do this. What they do is they put together a model within our mind of the external world that we believe is real. And it's astonishing. But no, it's not. It's always been an internal construct within mind. And it's only by starting to realize the truth of that and how far it really goes, in discussions of quantum physics and what's called collapse of the wave function, that the observer seems to precipitate out of reality. The truth of the matter is that very fundamental principle of quantum physics is at work all the time in all of us about everything. That is, everything that we are witnessing is, quote, collapse of the wave function, is due to the observer. And there's no place in the physical brain where that observation and collapse of the wave function occurs. It's all occurring in that spiritual or mental realm that is what generates brain and the physical body and all this physical reality anyway. So it's addressing that supreme illusion and coming to realize that we need to flip that around to come to a deeper understanding of the nature of reality, that all this starts to make much more sense. And that is right at the leading edge of where the scientific community is now around brain, mind, consciousness, and the fundamental nature of reality. This is about a revolution that will dwarf the Copernican revolution. That was when scientists, with Galileo and others hundreds of years ago, determined that the sun might be the center of the universe and not the earth. And I would say that revolution was minuscule compared to what is coming to this world as we come to realize that consciousness is fundamental and creates all of emerging reality.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you, and what you're saying and what I love about it is it really resonates for a truth that I found through my own time in deep meditation, prayer, various practices, and tuning into that internal and seeing how much is being created within, and just going into these deep spaces where there's just a completely different reality from the one that I'm even thinking about available to me, which then changes the external reality. And one of the questions that I have for you, and you're doing this work with sounds and sacred sounds, and I think that's really beautiful. We had Bruce Lipton on the show who talked about different brain waves and how we can change the unconscious mind through accessing these different brain waves. And one of the questions I have for you, because you're talking about entering these really blissful or powerful states through sound. And one of the things about a lot of traditions is that they say it takes a lot of practice, it takes a long time. And now we have people like yourself and a lot of other meditation teachers and sound teachers, all sorts of healers who are saying it doesn't have to take a long time. Through your work, have you found that, if somebody went to your website, listened to some of your music, and by the way, guys, we're going to have a link at thrivinglaunch.com for you to be able to click, go over and grab those freebies from Dr. Eben. But I wanted to ask you, have you found that people can go into these states right away, or does it take a long time? What's that like?
I would say they can go in fairly quickly. It's kind of surprising. In fact, when Karen and I do workshops, sometimes we'll have people who have never meditated before who will have a very profound experience right there in the workshop. Something with veridical contact with a departed loved one and things like that. I mean, it doesn't necessarily take a long time to get there, but I will also add that I try to meditate an hour or two a day. I've been doing that for the last 6 years. I find that it has vastly improved my life. I mean, the scientific evidence for the benefits of meditation are growing all the time. The benefits for strengthening the immune system, the benefits for creativity and insight, kind of genius level insights and creative experiences. The ability to communicate with souls of departed loved ones, to seek guidance from spiritual guides and come to a much greater wisdom of how one's life is to unfold. I mean, that can all come from an ongoing practice of meditation. I would just like to encourage people to give it a serious try. Use meditation, try it for weeks, months, what have you, and not just try it once or twice and say, well, I don't see where this is going. And again, this is why I think you'll find that the sacred acoustics tones are so powerful, because they kind of jumpstart one's ability to get into these deep transcendental conscious states. But really, the answers do lie within us all, and we can all come to far greater wisdom. Important, again, to reemphasize, you don't think your way into all this. You can read all the books, you can watch the DVDs, go to the various lectures and presentations. All of that is wonderful. But to actually get to any of these truths, you need to go within. And that going within does involve your efforts to quiet the little voice of the ego, the little voice in the head that is more used to using tools like fear and anxiety to try and guide your behavior. Your ego is not really your friend in all this, although the ego serves an important role. So we gently put the ego into timeout. And these tones from sacred acoustics are very helpful at accessing that much grander observer within. The true mystery of consciousness is the awareness. And that awareness has access to a tremendous amount of knowledge and understanding and information. But it only comes from going within.
I love that quote. That's a great quote. You can't think your way into the mystery of consciousness. We've been here with Dr. Eben Alexander talking about consciousness, accessing transcendental states, and oneness. Thank you so much for tuning in, and keep thriving, everyone. You've been listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. For books and resources related to today's episode, make sure to head over to thrivinglaunch.com. We'll see you there. Be sure to listen to tomorrow's episode where we talk with Michael Neal about living a guided life. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to leave us a rating and subscribe on iTunes.